Close your eyes. Let the weight of the day find somewhere to rest. You have been carrying it since you woke up, through everything that happened and everything that didn't, through every moment that asked something of you and every moment that gave you less than you needed. You can put it down now, just for tonight, just for the next few hours. Maybe you are tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep, the kind of tired that comes from trying to hold things together for too long. From showing up in a life that sometimes feels like it is happening to you more than for you. From the particular exhaustion of a person who has been faithful to something without knowing for certain whether the faithfulness is going anywhere at all. If that is where you are tonight, I want you to know something before we begin. You are not the first person to feel that way. The man whose story we are about to walk through felt it too. He felt it for 70 years. And what he did with it, one quiet morning at a time, became one of the most remarkable lives ever recorded. His name was Daniel. Tonight we are not going to study him. We are going to walk beside him. From the morning everything was taken to the last words ever spoken over him, at the edge of a river, at the end of a very long life. And before this night is over, I think you will find something in his story that belongs to you. Breathe. Let your body settle. Let the room grow quiet around you. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Everything taken in a single day. Before we talk about what was taken, let us talk about what he had. This is the part of Daniel's story that almost never gets told. Not the visions, not the lions, not the fire. Before all of that, there was a boy with a life that fit him. A family he recognized, a city he loved, a future with shape and color and the particular warmth of something you can reach out and touch. He had been born into a noble family in Jerusalem. He had grown up in the shadow of the temple, where on clear mornings the smoke of the daily offering rose into the sky like a conversation between earth and heaven. He had been raised on the law of Moses, on the stories of Abraham and David, and the God who had walked with his people through every wilderness. He had memorized scripture. He had plans. He was, perhaps, 15 years old. And then the morning came when the horizon changed. It began as a sound, a low vibration in the ground before the eyes could confirm what the body already understood. And then the shape of it appeared on the hills outside the city. Banners, chariots, the dust of an army that did not lose. Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had come. He was the most powerful ruler alive on the earth at that moment in history. His empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the borders of Egypt. His armies were not an army. They were a machine, and he had not come to negotiate. The prophet Jeremiah had warned Jerusalem for years. If you do not return to God, this will happen. He had stood in the streets and said it plainly, again and again, with the specific exhaustion of a man who keeps telling people the truth they keep choosing not to hear. They had not listened. The gates opened, not by force, by surrender. King Jehoiakim walked out and handed over the temple treasures, gold and silver, sacred vessels that had stood in the house of the Lord since the days of Solomon. Objects so holy that only priests were permitted to touch them. All of it loaded onto carts and carried away to Babylon, placed in the treasury of a foreign god who had no ears. But Nebuchadnezzar was not finished. He was a strategist. And the most strategic thing you can do to a conquered nation is not to destroy its army. It is to take its future. His officers moved through Jerusalem with the practiced efficiency of men who had done this before. They were not cruel about it. They did not have to be. They moved from house to house, and when they found what they were looking for, they simply took it. They came to the house where Daniel lived. He would have heard them before the knock on the door, would have heard them on the street, the sound of boots on stone, the particular silence that had replaced the usual morning noise of the neighborhood. He had been raised on scripture. He knew what captivity looked like. Reading about a thing and standing inside it are not the same. His mother, his father, the room where he had slept every night of his life, the window that looked west toward the temple. The smell of olive oil and old stone and the city he knew better than any other place on earth. He would not see any of it again. They bound his hands and walked him into the street, where a line of young men was already forming. Sons of priests and scholars and officials. Boys he had grown up alongside, studied with, eaten with at festival tables. Now they walked together in the particular silence of people who are still processing something too large and too sudden to have found its proper feeling yet. The march to Babylon was over 800 miles, through the hills of Judea, across the Jordan, into the Syrian desert, along the great rivers of Mesopotamia. Weeks of walking, weeks of dust and cold nights and feet that never fully stopped aching, and a grief that did not yet have a name because it was still too new and too enormous to fit inside one. On one of those nights, deep in the middle of the journey, Daniel lay on the ground and could not sleep. The other boys breathed in the rhythms of exhaustion around him. The guards sat at their posts, indifferent. The desert was cold and very quiet. He looked up at the stars. He had looked at these same stars from his window in Jerusalem. They were the same stars. They did not belong to Babylon or to Judah. They hung over everything equally, made by a God who was not limited by geography, not confused by borders, not left behind in a city that was now 800 miles in the wrong direction, which meant he was here too, in this desert, on this road, looking at this specific boy on this specific night. That thought did not fix anything. It did not shorten the road or stop the grief or give him his home back. But it was true. And he held it the way you hold on to something in the dark. Not because it solves the problem, but because it is the one solid thing your fingers can find. He held it all the way to Babylon. And then Babylon appeared on the horizon. And even grief had to pause. Nothing in Judea had prepared him for this. Jerusalem was a city of stone and faith, of narrow streets and the smell of incense and the quiet dignity of a place built by people who believed they were building it for God. It was ancient and intimate and human in scale. Babylon was built to make you feel small. The walls were so thick that chariots could race along the top of them 4 abreast. The Ishtar Gate rose above the entrance like a declaration, covered in brilliant blue glazed tile, decorated with golden lions and dragons that caught the midday sun and threw it back at you. The Euphrates ran through the center of the city. Bridges arched over it. Gardens hung from terraces above the rooftops, green and impossible and serene, as if someone had decided that gravity was simply a suggestion for those with sufficient ambition. And everywhere, on every corner, and in every public square, statues of gods. Marduk, chief god of Babylon. Ishtar, goddess of war and love. Nabu, Shamash, Sin. Each one receiving daily offerings, the air of the city thick with incense, and the smoke of 1,000 fires burning in honor of things made by human hands that could not see or hear or answer. Daniel stood in the palace courtyard, still dusty from 800 miles of road, and felt the full weight of where he was. This was not his home. These were not his gods. The chief official of the king, a man named Ashpenaz, moved through the group of captives with the practiced eye of someone evaluating what he had been given. He was looking for intelligence, composure, the capacity to become something different from what you were born. He stopped in front of Daniel. He studied him, the clarity of his eyes, the stillness of his posture, the way this boy, after weeks of captivity, was still holding himself like someone who knew who he was. This one, Ashpenaz said, he will do well. Daniel and 3 of his closest friends were chosen: Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. They were brought to a special quarter of the palace and given an education. 3 years of the language and literature of Babylon, the science of the stars, the art of interpretation, everything the greatest civilization on earth knew, laid before them like a gift. And then the official came with new names: Daniel became Belteshazzar, meaning Bel protects his life, after the chief god of Babylon. Hananiah became Shadrach. Mishael became Meshach. Azariah became Abednego. Each new name a small erasure, each one carrying a Babylonian god inside it, planted like a seed in soil that was not supposed to receive it. This was the point of the whole enterprise. Not cruelty. Strategy. If you want to turn someone into something new, the first thing you take is the name. They had already taken the city, the home, the family, the future. Now they wanted the last thing. The story a person tells about who they are and whose they are. The food arrived the next morning. Rich food from the king's own table. Meat offered to idols before it reached the plate. Wine poured in honor of Marduk. The finest meal in the most powerful city on earth. It was, on its surface, generosity. But Daniel understood what it was. It was the next small surrender in a sequence designed to end somewhere specific. He went to the guard quietly, without drama, without a speech. He said, "Please, give us vegetables and water for 10 days. Look at us at the end. Compare us to the others. Then decide." The guard looked at him for a long moment. There was something in the way Daniel asked that was hard to name. Not arrogance, not stubbornness. Something quieter and more settled than either. A person who had decided, in a room no one else could see inside, that there was one thing in him that was not available for surrender. 10 days, the guard said. For 10 days, while the other young men ate from plates piled high, Daniel and his 3 friends ate lentils and cucumbers and bread and drank water from the well. Every morning, a plain plate, not impressive, not dramatic. Just a quiet, daily, unwitnessed choice that said, in the only language still available to him, "This is still who I am. Be still for a moment here. Let the night settle around you. Let your body grow a little heavier, your breathing a little slower." This is the center of chapter 1, and it is worth resting in. A boy had lost his city, his name, his future, and everything he had planned. And in the middle of all that loss, he found the one thing that could not be taken unless he gave it. One choice, made every morning, in a room with no audience. That is the whole of it. Not the lions, not the visions. This. At the end of 10 days, the guard came to look. He stood there in silence, looking at Daniel and his 3 friends, and then at the others who had been eating from the king's table. He looked back at Daniel. They were healthier, clearer, stronger in presence and sharper in bearing than any of the young men eating royal food. The guard shook his head slowly. He had no framework for explaining it. He let them eat as they wished and said nothing more about it. 3 years passed. Daniel and his friends studied. They learned the language so thoroughly they dreamed in it. They mastered the literature, the astronomy, the complete systems of knowledge that the greatest civilization on earth had accumulated over centuries. They learned faster than anyone else. They remembered more. When the time came to stand before Nebuchadnezzar himself, the king questioned them personally. And the book records the result simply. In every matter of wisdom and understanding, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. 10 times. Not from 3 years of education. From the god who had traveled 800 miles of desert road with a boy who looked up at the stars one night and decided, without evidence and without guarantee, that the same God who made those stars was still watching him. Every evening after that, Daniel opened the window of his room. He turned to face west, toward a city he could not see, toward a temple that stood in rubble 800 miles away. And he prayed 3 times a day, every day. He did not know yet how long this would go on. He did not know that he would never go home. He did not know that God was not merely preserving him in Babylon, but preparing him there, in the ordinary faithfulness of a plain plate and an open window. He only knew that Jerusalem was west, that the window was there, that God was listening. Tonight, wherever your particular exile has taken you, the window is still there too. Whatever was taken from you, in whatever single day or slow accumulation of days your own losses arrived, there is still one thing they cannot take. The turning, the direction you choose to face, the daily, quiet, unspectacular decision to keep believing. He is here. In whatever foreign city your life has put you in, He has not lost track of your name. Let your body rest now. Let the road you have been walking today go quiet. The plain plate and the open window and the God who was in Babylon are enough for tonight. Sleep well, beloved. The window is still worth opening. Chapter 2. The night he stood between life and death. There is a kind of faith that lives comfortably inside ordinary days. The faith that prays when prayer feels natural, that trusts when trusting costs nothing, that believes when the evidence makes believing the easier choice. Most of us live inside that kind of faith for most of our lives. And it is real, and it matters. But there is another kind, the kind that only gets tested when everything goes wrong at once. When the night arrives with no warning, and the morning is not guaranteed, and the only thing left is the unpolished, desperate reaching of a person who has run out of everything except the instinct to turn toward God. That kind of faith cannot be manufactured in a crisis. It is built in the ordinary days before the crisis arrives. In the plain plates and the open windows and the 10-day tests, this is the chapter where Daniel finds out what he has been building. It came for him in the middle of what should have been an ordinary day. Several years had passed since the plain food and the 10 days. He had graduated into something more settled, a junior member of the advisory class, known and respected within the palace system, the kind of stability that a displaced person builds slowly and carefully, the kind that makes the difference between a life that functions and one that merely survives. And then a knock on the door, a soldier in the doorway, not the arrival of a guest, the arrival of news. His name was Arioch, captain of the king's guard, a man who had learned to keep his face from showing what his voice could not fully hide. He said it plainly. The king had ordered the execution of all the wise men in Babylon. Daniel had been enrolled among the wise men as part of his training. In the eyes of the empire, he was one of them, and the order covered all of them. No exceptions. He heard this and went very still, not frozen, still. The particular stillness of someone whose mind is moving fast behind a face that is holding quiet. Before emotion, before panic, he reached for understanding. He asked why. Arioch told him everything. The night before, Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed. Not the soft, fading kind that dissolves with morning. The other kind. The kind that grabs you out of sleep with your heart pounding, certain that what you just experienced was more real than the room you woke up in. He had sat up in the dark, gasping, trembling, reaching for the images that were already slipping through his fingers. He had called his wise men. Every astrologer, magician, enchanter, diviner in Babylon. The finest minds of the greatest empire on earth, assembled in the throne room in the early hours before dawn. And he had said, "Tell me what I dreamed. Not interpret it. Tell me what it was." The wise men had done what wise men do when asked the impossible. They explained carefully and logically why it could not be done. No one can tell a man his own dream without being told it first. This is not unreasonable. It is simply true. Nebuchadnezzar did not accept it. He decided that their inability to do the impossible was evidence of their fraudulence. He wanted the dream. If they could not provide it, everything they had ever told him was a lie. The decree went out before the city was fully awake. Daniel listened to all of this. Then he looked at Arioch and said, "Give me time. I will go to the king, and I will tell him the dream and its meaning." Arioch stared at him. The thing about Daniel's words was not their confidence. It was the quality beneath the confidence. He was not bluffing. He was not pretending to already know the dream. He was saying, quietly and without theater, that he knew who to ask, and that the one he was going to ask was reliable. That is a different kind of courage than bravado. It is the courage of a person who has been building something in the ordinary days, who knows from experience, not theory, that the God he serves does not abandon him when the stakes are highest. Arioch felt something in it. He agreed to speak to the king. He bought Daniel the hours he needed. Daniel went home. He did not sit down to review his notes on dream interpretation. He went straight to the room where his 3 friends were sleeping and woke them up. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, the 3 who had walked in chains out of Jerusalem with him, the 3 who understood, without explanation, what was happening inside him. He told them plainly, "We may all be dead in the morning unless God shows me what the king dreamed. We need to pray. Right now. Tonight. No discussion of alternatives." They knelt together on the floor of a small room in the city of Babylon, 4 young men from a conquered nation with no political protection and a death sentence still technically in effect, and they prayed. The room was dark. The city outside was quiet. They prayed for hours. Not polished prayers, not the ceremonial language of the temple. The prayers of people who are genuinely frightened, who have genuinely run out of options, who have nowhere to go except toward the one they have been going toward every day of their captivity. Let the room go quiet here for a moment. Let the image settle. 4 people in the dark, with nothing left except the turning. No guarantee, no sign, just the reaching, in the honest place where all genuine prayer lives, toward the God who they had been told and had chosen to believe was listening. This is what those years of plain food and open windows had been building toward. Not a technique, not a method, a relationship deep enough to hold the weight of a night like this. Somewhere before dawn, Daniel slept, and in that sleep, God gave him the dream, the whole thing. The exact images Nebuchadnezzar had seen, clear and complete, along with the meaning of every detail. The whole timeline of human history laid out before him like an open scroll. Daniel woke with his heart pounding. He stayed on his knees. And in the dark, before he did anything else, before he went to Arioch or prepared what he would say to the king, he worshipped. "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever," he said quietly, his voice low in the room. "Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him." He said this not as the opening of a speech, not as preparation for what came next. He said it because it was the truest thing he knew, and before he walked into whatever the morning held, he needed to say it out loud. In a room with no audience except the one who already knew everything. Then he went to Arioch. "Do not execute the wise men. Take me to the king. I will tell him what he needs to know." Arioch moved quickly. The throne room. Nebuchadnezzar, hollow-eyed from a night of no sleep and mounting fury, looking at this young man from Judah with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream?" Daniel stood in the center of the throne room of the most powerful empire on earth, no crown and no weapons and no political standing, and spoke with a steadiness that the room noticed. No wise man, no enchanter, no astrologer, no diviner can explain what the king has asked. That is true. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has shown the king what will take place in the days ahead. He paused. "This mystery has not been revealed to me because I have greater wisdom than anyone else. It was revealed so that the king might know the interpretation, so that you might understand." Then Daniel described the dream. He watched the king's face as the words came out, the eyes widening, the jaw tightening. The slow, unavoidable recognition of a man hearing his own private vision described in precise detail by someone who was not there. The enormous statue, the head of pure gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay, and the rock, cut without human hands, that shattered the whole thing and became a mountain filling the entire earth. Then Daniel explained it. 4 kingdoms, each one enormous, each one seeming permanent. Babylon, the head of gold, the greatest on earth right now. After it, another, silver and strong but lesser. Then bronze, spreading across the whole earth. Then iron, crushing and terrible, the most powerful of all, but mixed with clay, unable to hold together forever. And then the rock, the kingdom not built by human ambition or maintained by military force. The kingdom arriving from completely outside the systems of human power, coming to shatter every structure that human achievement had ever built, and then filling the whole earth, never to end. Nebuchadnezzar heard all of this. And then the most powerful man on earth rose from his throne, crossed the floor, and knelt in front of Daniel. "Surely your God is the God of gods," he said, his voice holding something it had not held before. "The Lord of kings, a revealer of mysteries." He gave Daniel gifts. He made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. He placed him in charge of all the wise men, the very men who had spent the night marked for death. And at Daniel's request, he elevated Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego alongside him. Daniel went home that evening. He sat in the quiet for a long time. He thought about the statue. 4 kingdoms, all of them enormous. All of them swept away like summer chaff before something that could not be built by any human hand. He thought about the rock. He did not know yet what face it would wear. He did not know the name. He only knew that God was moving through history the way a river moves through stone. Not with speed you can see from day to day, but with a certainty that nothing could permanently resist. And somewhere in that certainty, there was room for a captive boy from Jerusalem and the 3 people who had knelt beside him in the dark. Maybe tonight you have run out of options. Maybe the morning feels like something you are not sure you can handle. Maybe you have already tried everything you know how to try, and the only thing left is the thing Daniel did in that room before the sky grew light. The turning, the reaching, the prayer that is not polished but is honest. Bring it, because the moment you begin, something is already in motion that you did not cause and cannot stop. The answer was given before the prayer was finished. It always is. Let your body grow heavy now. Let the things you could not solve today rest in hands larger than yours. Let tonight be the room in the dark before the morning comes. He heard you. The moment you turned, sleep well, beloved. The window is still worth opening. Chapter 3. 3 men and a fire. Daniel is not in this chapter. That is the first thing to understand, and it matters more than it might seem. Chapter 3 of the book of Daniel is the only chapter in the entire book where Daniel himself does not appear. He is somewhere else in the palace, attending to the administration of the empire, while the 3 closest people in his life face the worst moment of theirs without him. We do not know if he heard about it while it was happening. We do not know what he felt when he found out. The book does not tell us. But what the book does tell us is this. When the moment came, when the music played and the whole world knelt and the furnace was hot and the stakes were as absolute as stakes can be, those 3 men did not become something they had not already been. They simply revealed what the ordinary days had been building inside them. You cannot manufacture in a crisis what you have not been practicing in the ordinary days that precede it. Some time had passed since the morning of the dream. Nebuchadnezzar had seen, in that single night, that the God of these young men from Judah was real in a way that none of his own gods had ever managed to be. He had knelt on the floor of his own throne room and said the words, But kings are complicated people. Power has a long memory and a short attention span. And whatever had moved in Nebuchadnezzar the morning he knelt before Daniel, it had not yet done the deep work that real transformation requires. Because a few years later, he built the statue. On the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon, a golden image, not small, not ornamental, 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, covered entirely in gold, visible for miles in every direction. Not a statue of a god, a statue of Nebuchadnezzar himself. When it was finished, messengers went to every province. Every official, every governor, every leader of every territory under Babylonian rule received the same summons. Come to the plain of Dura for the dedication ceremony. You did not decline. On the appointed day, the plain was filled with people. Think about what that looked like. Thousands of the most powerful and accomplished people in the world's most powerful empire gathered on a flat, open plain under an enormous sky, all of them standing in the shadow of this golden figure blazing in the midday sun. Military commanders, provincial governors, judges and treasurers and royal advisors, all assembled, all waiting. A herald delivered the announcement in a voice built for announcements. When the music plays, everyone falls down and worships the golden image. Everyone, without exception. The furnace burning at the edge of the plain was not there for decoration. The musicians raised their instruments. The signal was given. Sound filled the plain, enormous and inescapable, and the crowd moved like water finding its level. Thousands dropping to their knees in a single flowing motion, faces pressed to the ground. Every person, except 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, stood upright. Pause here. Not on the drama of it, on the loneliness of it. Standing still while thousands of people kneel around you is not a feeling most of us have experienced. The pressure of unanimous human consensus is not a metaphor. It is a physical force. The mere fact that everyone else is doing something creates its own gravity, and every second that passes makes the standing more visible, more conspicuous, more costly. They stood anyway, not with raised fists, not with a speech prepared. They simply did not kneel. Their bodies remained upright in a sea of bowed heads, quiet, still, present. It did not take long for someone to notice. There were men in that crowd who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Men who had watched these foreigners from Judah rise in the palace year after year, who had been calculating their resentment, looking for an angle. They went to the king. The 3 men were brought before Nebuchadnezzar on the plain, in front of the assembled crowd, with the golden statue behind them and the furnace clearly visible. The king kept his voice low, the particular low of a man who is most dangerous when he is not shouting. Is it true that you do not serve my gods or worship the image I have set up? He offered them one more chance. When the music plays again, if you are ready to bow, then all is well. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then the king added the question that was the real point of everything. What god will be able to rescue you from my hand? It was a genuine challenge. Name the force that can counter my authority. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego looked at each other. Then they turned back to the king. O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. That first sentence alone required a quality that most people will spend their entire lives searching for. We do not need to defend ourselves. The deciding was already done. This moment was not a decision point. It was simply the public expression of a decision that had been made in 100 private, ordinary, unobserved moments across years of daily faithfulness. They continued. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. And then 5 words. But even if he does not, stay with those 5 words. Do not rush past them. They were not claiming a guarantee. They were not invoking a promise or trying to strike a deal with heaven. They were saying something more radical and more honest than any of that. They were saying that their faithfulness to God was not conditional on His protection, that what God chose to do or not do in the next several minutes was not the reason they served Him. They served Him because He was God, because He was worthy, because in the worst possible outcome, He was still God and they were still His, and no fire on earth could change that foundational fact. Nebuchadnezzar's restraint broke. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times beyond normal. The soldiers obeyed. They stoked it until the heat rippled the air in visible waves, until the ground near the entrance was too hot to stand on. The soldiers who threw the 3 men in were overcome by the heat before they could step back. The 3 were bound and thrown inside. Nebuchadnezzar stood at the edge and watched. He was expecting 3 seconds and ash. Instead, he leaped to his feet. He turned to his advisors, his voice strange. "Didn't we throw 3 men into the fire?" "Certainly, O king." "Look," he pointed into the furnace. "I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Let the room go quiet here." Oh, 4. Not 3 bodies consumed. 4 figures, upright, moving through the flames as if the fire were simply air. The ropes burned away, their bodies intact, their clothes intact, and beside them, a 4th. A presence so different from anything human that even a pagan king, looking at it through walls of flame, could tell it was not of this world. Within the Christian tradition, many understand this presence as the Son of God, appearing before the Incarnation, already present in the place of the worst of it before the 3 men arrived. Others understand it as a mighty angel sent by God. Both readings agree on this. God did not watch from a distance. Something of the divine entered the furnace with them, so that the worst of it was not a place they had to be alone. Nebuchadnezzar walked as close to the entrance as the heat would allow and called into the fire, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out." And they walked out. The crowd crowded close, governors and advisors and military commanders reaching out to touch the hair and the robes, looking for burns that were not there, confirming with their own hands that the fire had not touched them, not even the smell of smoke. The king spoke, and his voice held something it had not held before. "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him. They defied the king's command, and they were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." He issued a new decree. No one in any nation or language was to say anything against this God, because no other God, the king said himself, can save in this way. The 3 friends returned to their duties. They did not build monuments to themselves. They went back to the work they had been doing, with the same quiet faithfulness that had produced the moment on the plain. The promise was not that they would not be thrown in. They were thrown in. The promise was not that the furnace would not be hot. It was hotter than it had ever been. The promise was not even that they would survive, because they did not know they would survive when they refused to kneel. The promise was the 4th figure, the one who did not wait outside the furnace and call in encouragement from a safe distance, the one who entered the worst of it alongside them, who was already there when they arrived. There are furnaces in every life, real situations of real heat, the kind where you cannot see the other side of it, and the people who put you there are watching from the outside with no idea of what it actually feels like inside. In those moments, the promise is not that you will be spared. The promise is that you will not be alone in it. He was in the furnace before they got there. He is already in yours. Be still for a moment now. Let your body settle into the mattress. Let your breath come slow and even. Let the warmth around you be the warmth of someone who entered every furnace first. You do not walk into anything alone. Sleep well, beloved. The fourth figure is already there, and the window is still worth opening. Chapter 4. The King Who Had to Learn to Look Up. There is a man in this chapter who does not get talked about enough. Not for his power, not for his vision, not for any of the qualities we usually celebrate. He gets credit for something harder and quieter than all of those things. He tells a powerful man the truth he does not want to hear, and he does it with genuine reluctance, with a wish, recorded in the text, that the truth were different. That man is Daniel. And what he does in this chapter is not a prophecy or a miracle. It is something more ordinary and more difficult than either of those things. It is care. Several years had passed since the morning of the dream. A kind of settled rhythm had established itself in the palace. Daniel was older now, more seasoned, carrying his positions with the quiet competence of someone who has learned that excellence in a place you did not choose is still excellence. He had been watching Nebuchadnezzar. This is a strange thing to sit with, the full history between these two men. Nebuchadnezzar had ordered the destruction of Jerusalem. He had walked away with the temple vessels in his carts. He had taken Daniel from his family at 15 and sent him on an 800-mile road in chains toward a city that never felt like home. By every ordinary measure of human emotion, Daniel had every reason to keep this king at arm's length for the rest of his days. And yet over the years, something had grown between them. Not friendship exactly. Something more complicated and more real. The kind of bond that forms when two people who should not understand each other somehow do, when something genuine passes between them through the daily business of working alongside each other for years. Nebuchadnezzar had seen in Daniel the quality he could not find anywhere else in his empire. Not just the wisdom, though the wisdom was real. Something beneath the wisdom. A groundedness, an incapacity for flattery. A willingness to look at things honestly that the people around a powerful man almost never maintain. Daniel had seen in Nebuchadnezzar the particular loneliness of a man too powerful to be told the truth by anyone around him. So when the king came to Daniel with another dream, Daniel listened. And when he understood what the dream meant, he went quiet. The text records this with a detail that almost never gets highlighted. Daniel was alarmed, and his thoughts troubled him. He sat in silence for about an hour. An hour. In a meeting with the most powerful man on earth, waiting for an answer, Daniel sat quietly for an hour. The king noticed, and he said something that tells you everything about how far the relationship had come. He said to Daniel, "Do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you." The king was giving his interpreter permission to deliver unwelcome news. He could see in Daniel's face that what was coming was not good. And his response was not impatience. It was gentleness. In one sentence, across the distance of rank and history, something human passed between them. Daniel spoke. The dream was a tree. At the center of the earth, growing until its top reached the sky, visible to the ends of the whole world. Beautiful leaves, abundant fruit, animals sheltering under it, birds nesting in its branches, everything alive being fed from it. Everyone in the room understood immediately who the tree was. And then a Holy One descended from heaven and gave an order. Cut down the tree, strip its branches, scatter its fruit, drive away everything sheltering under it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field. And then the disturbing part. Let his mind be changed from that of a man and given the mind of an animal. For 7 years, Daniel understood the dream instantly. He spent an hour not saying so. When he finally spoke, he began with the sentence that only someone who genuinely cared about the person in front of them would think to include. My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. That is not court protocol. That is not diplomatic preamble. That is a person wishing, out loud, before they say the hard thing, that the hard thing were not true. Then he told the king, The tree was Nebuchadnezzar, his greatness, his reach, his power that sheltered the nations. And the decree from heaven was real and coming soon. His mind would be taken from him. He would be driven from the palace. He would live in the open fields like an animal, eat grass, be drenched by the dew of heaven, his hair growing like feathers, his nails like claws. For 7 years, but the stump would remain, the roots in the ground. And after the appointed time, his mind would return and he would be restored. Daniel gave him counsel at the end. Renounce your sins. Be kind to the oppressed. It may be that your prosperity will continue. 12 months passed. Nothing happened. In the quiet of 12 months without consequence, the mind does its comfortable work of revision. Maybe it was only a dream. Maybe the condition had been quietly met. The way that time without crisis lulls you back toward the assumption that crisis is not actually coming. Then one afternoon, Nebuchadnezzar stood on the roof of the royal palace and looked out over everything he had built. The canals, the gardens, the temples, the walls that nothing had ever breached. All of it spread before him in the afternoon light. And he said the thing that Daniel had warned him not to say. Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? The words were still in his mouth, and a voice came from heaven. That is how the book records it. The sentence was not yet finished, and the decree was already executing. No delay, no warning. The pride and the consequence were simultaneous. What followed is one of the strangest passages in ancient literature. The most powerful king in the world lost his mind. He was driven from the palace. He lived in the open fields. He ate grass like cattle. He was drenched with dew. His hair grew long and matted. His nails grew like claws. 7 years. 7 years is long enough for the world to absorb your absence. Long enough for the systems you built to stabilize without you. Long enough for the empire to discover that it does not, in fact, require you to function. And during those 7 years, Daniel was somewhere in the palace. The text does not tell us what he did. It is one of the silences of this book, and silences in this book tend to matter. We know he kept his window. We know he prayed 3 times a day, facing west. We know he continued to serve faithfully. We suspect he prayed for the man in the field, because this is who Daniel was. Not a person who kept careful score, not a person who waited with quiet satisfaction for the punishment of his oppressor. He had wished, out loud, that the dream had applied to someone else. He had spent an hour in troubled silence before delivering news he did not want to deliver. People who live that way do not stop caring about someone simply because they have been proven right. And then, one day, something changed in the field. After 7 years of looking at nothing but the ground in front of him, after 7 years of grass and rain, and the slow, meaningless cycling of days without history, Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes toward heaven. That was all it took. One small, voluntary motion. The deliberate turning of the face upward, and his sanity returned. He wrote down what happened next in his own words, and those words were preserved because they are among the most unexpected things a man like Nebuchadnezzar was ever likely to say. I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. He did not say this bitterly, not like a man reciting a lesson he was forced to memorize. He said it with the particular authority of a man who had stood inside the truth of it for 7 years, who had eaten it, who had felt the dew on his skin in the dark of the field, who had looked up, and the first thing his restored mind saw was the sky. He was restored. His honor returned. Greater greatness than before was added to him. And Daniel, somewhere in the palace, received this news. We do not have his words. We have something better. We have the hour of troubled silence. the wish said out loud before the hard truth. The decades of daily prayers through a window facing a city this man had destroyed. That is what genuine care looks like, not the performance of it. The actual thing, practiced in private, sustained through years when there was no visible result, maintained not because it was comfortable or strategic, but because it was simply who Daniel was. The king who leveled Jerusalem eventually knelt before the God of Jerusalem, not because he was forced to, because the part of him that could not be stripped away by 7 years in a field finally recognized what it had always needed. There are seasons in every life that feel like the field. Stripped down, reduced, without the usual scaffolding of achievement or identity or the things that made you feel like yourself. In those seasons, there is one thing that Nebuchadnezzar did that worked. He looked up, not because the restoration was immediate, not because the morning arrived the moment he did it, but because that one small voluntary motion, the turning of the face toward heaven, is where every restoration in this story begins. The roots are still in the ground tonight. Let your body grow still now. Let the field quiet down around you. Let the dew settle and the stars come out, and the one who numbers every hair on your head keep watch over these hours. He has not forgotten the shape of you. Sleep well, beloved. The stump holds, and the window is still worth opening. Chapter 5. The Last Night of Babylon. By the time this chapter begins, Daniel was old. Not the dramatic frailty of someone at the very edge, but old in the way that decades of a difficult life make a person old. The kind of old that shows in a face that has not been protected from difficult things, that has seen too much to be surprised by much. That carries, in the particular lines around the eyes, the specific weight of someone who has watched things end before and knows the signs. He knew the signs. Many years had passed since Nebuchadnezzar. The great king had died, as all kings die, and the empire had moved through several pairs of hands since then. Babylon was still Babylon. The walls still stood. The Ishtar gate still gleamed. The Euphrates still ran through the center of the city with the same indifference it had always had to the particular human dramas playing out on its banks. But something had shifted in the quality of the air. The way air shifts before weather that has been building for days finally arrives. To the east, the armies of Cyrus the Persian had been moving through nation after nation with a systematic patience that the ancient world had not quite seen before. One kingdom after another had yielded, not always by force but by the sheer weight of inevitability. And now Cyrus had arrived outside the walls of Babylon itself. His army had made camp. His ziga had begun. Inside the walls, the arithmetic felt reassuring. The grain stores were full. The water supply was independent. The walls had never been breached in the entire history of the city. Let Cyrus wait as long as he liked. Babylon would not fall. This was the atmosphere in which Belshazzar decided to throw a party. There is a particular kind of person who responds to the proximity of danger by insisting louder and louder that the danger is not real. Who fills the space between themselves and what is coming with enough noise and spectacle and celebration that the approaching thing can almost not be heard. Belshazzar was that kind of person. He was young, and he had inherited an empire he had not built, and he had never stood in a room with someone like Nebuchadnezzar and felt from the inside what it actually costs to hold a kingdom together through decades of consequence. He had grown up in the stories of his grandfather, the way children grow up in stories of the famous and distant. He knew the facts of them. He had never felt the weight. He invited 1,000 nobles to his feast. The great hall of the palace was filled, tables heavy with food, wine flowing, musicians playing, the organized spectacle of imperial celebration designed to say to everyone present and to the army outside the walls, we are permanent. We are powerful. What you see outside our gates is a minor inconvenience. The evening deepened. The wine accumulated. And somewhere in the long arc of the feast, drunk and loose and feeling the particular recklessness that comes from wine and walls and an inherited confidence in one's own invulnerability, Belshazzar had an idea. Bring me the gold and silver goblets from the temple in Jerusalem. Let us drink from them. Let the weight of that settle for a moment. Those vessels had been in the treasury of Babylon for decades. They had been carried out of Jerusalem in the year 605 before Christ, the same year Daniel was taken, on the same morning when the world as the people of Judah knew it ended. They were sacred objects from the house of the God of Israel. Objects so specifically holy that in the original temple only consecrated priests were permitted to touch them. To bring them out now was not an accident. It was not ignorance. Belshazzar knew what they were. Everyone in that room knew what they were. He was reaching for them precisely because of what they were. The most sacred objects of the God his grandfather had acknowledged on his knees. And drinking from them in honor of Babylon's gods was the most direct statement possible about whose God mattered here. The servants hesitated. The servants obeyed. The vessels appeared on the tables. The nobles grabbed them with the casual enthusiasm of people past caring about significance. Belshazzar lifted one high. To Marduk, to Ishtar, to all the gods of Babylon. The crowd roared, and then the laughter stopped, not gradually, all at once. The way sound stops when something happens that none of the ordinary rules of the world can explain. The way a room full of people can become completely silent in the space of a single breath. On the wall of the banquet hall, in the light of the torches, where a moment before there had been only white plaster, a hand appeared. Not a whole figure, just a hand, visible from the wrist, with fingers that moved with a deliberateness that was the most frightening thing about it. Not rushed, not frantic. The unhurried movement of something that had all the time in the world, because time itself was its instrument. It wrote. The sound of it carried through the silence. A steady, patient scratching. Each stroke placed exactly where it belonged. The whole hall watching and no one breathing. Belshazzar's wine cup dropped from his fingers. The book describes what happened to his body with clinical precision. His face went pale. His thoughts terrified him. His knees knocked together. His legs gave way beneath him. This was what happens to a human body when the architecture of its assumptions collapses all at once. When the certainty that you are protected, that the walls will hold, that the rules you have been playing by are the real rules, is suddenly and completely gone. The hand finished writing and disappeared. 4 words on the wall. Mena, Mena, Tekel, Parsin. Belshazzar found his voice and used it to summon every wise man in Babylon. They filed in, studied the words, consulted their systems of knowledge, and said nothing useful. The knowledge that would make those words readable was not in their library. None of them could read it. Then the Queen Mother entered the hall. Old, calm, the composed stillness of someone who has outlasted enough crises to know there is usually a path through them if you stay steady enough to find it. She looked at the king's face and said quietly, "There is a man in your kingdom. Send for him. His name is Daniel." Daniel came. He did not hurry. He walked into that enormous hall with its 1,000 frightened nobles and its overturned cups and the 4 words still visible on the wall in the torchlight, and he looked at the king with the steadiness of a man who has already lived through several endings and knows what they look like from the inside. Belshazzar offered him purple and gold and the 3rd highest position in the kingdom if he could read the writing. Daniel looked at the king, then at the wall, then back at the king. "Keep your gifts," he said. "Give your rewards to someone else. But I will read the writing and tell you what it means." Then, before he touched the writing on the wall at all, he turned to history. He told Belshazzar about his grandfather, not as a lecture, as a mirror. He described Nebuchadnezzar's greatness, his pride, the 7 years in the field, the single morning the king looked up, and everything was restored. He told it in the voice of someone who had been inside that story for every day of it. He was handing Belshazzar the map that would explain where he was about to find himself. And then the sentence that no one else in that room had the standing or the courage to say, "But you, his grandson, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this." You knew. Your grandfather did not know. He had to learn through 7 years of grass and dew. But you had the story. You had the record. Daniel himself was standing in your court, a living witness of everything God had done in Babylon across 50 years. And you knew. And you lifted the cup anyway. You set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You brought out his vessels and drank from them, in honor of gods of silver and gold and wood and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. The room was completely silent. Then Daniel read the wall. Mena, numbered. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Mene again. Confirmed. The numbering is done. There is no appeal. Tekel. Weed. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Parsin. Divided. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The silence that followed was different from any silence the hall had held before. The silence of something final. The silence of a room full of people who understood, in their bodies before their minds caught up, that they had just heard something that could not be undone. Belshazzar gave Daniel the purple robe and the gold chain. A king keeping a promise in the last hours of his kingdom. Perhaps the only thing left that felt like agency over anything. That same night, outside the walls that had never been breached, Cyrus's engineers had diverted the Euphrates upstream. The water level inside the city dropped. The iron grates that covered the river's passage beneath the walls lifted out of the water. The riverbed became passable. In the dark of the night, while the feast continued and the wine flowed and the sacred cups of Jerusalem passed from hand to hand, the Persian army walked through the riverbed, under the walls of Babylon, into the heart of the city. The guards were at the feast. The soldiers moved through the streets without opposition. They reached the palace. They broke through the doors. And before the night was over, Belshazzar was dead. The empire of Babylon, the head of gold, fell in a single night. Daniel received this news from wherever he was. We do not know the details of that moment. We know only that he had seen it coming, that he had read the words himself and translated them plainly, and walked out of the hall with the gold chain around his neck and the knowledge of what the night would bring. He had been a witness to the ending of a world, and not a satisfied witness. He had lived in this city for decades. Some part of it had become, in the complicated and unwanted and entirely real way that exile makes a home out of whatever it gives you, his home. The language he thought in, the streets he knew, the river he could hear from his window at night, all of it dissolving. There is a grief that has no simple name. The grief of watching something end that you never loved but had learned to inhabit. The grief of the familiar becoming unfamiliar, of the world reorganizing itself around you into a shape you do not yet recognize. It is not the same as losing something precious, but it is real. Daniel had been 15 when Babylon took Jerusalem from him. He was in his late 60s, perhaps older, when Babylon itself was taken. He had outlasted the empire. Every era ends. Every wall that seemed permanent eventually comes down, by a river running beneath it, or by some other means that no one inside the walls was watching for. The question has never been whether the ending will come. The question has always been who you are when it arrives. What you carried faithfully through the era that ended. What the ending found intact in you that the era could not touch. Daniel had kept the window open through all of it. He had prayed west through Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, and now through the night Babylon fell. He had given his best to a place that was not his own, without surrendering the deepest thing that made him who he was. And when the empire ended, that thing was still there, still intact, still his, still worth the faithfulness it had cost. The same will be true for you. Whatever era you are in tonight, whatever chapter of your life feels like it is ending or beginning or suspended somewhere uncertain in between, there is something in you that the era cannot touch. The part that turns toward God, the direction you choose to face, the window you keep opening, that will still be there on the morning after every ending. Let the night be quiet now. Let whatever is changing in your life rest in the hands of the one who has overseen every empire and every ending since history began. He was not surprised by what happened to Babylon. He is not surprised by what is happening in your life. He holds it all. Sleep well, beloved. Every ending has a morning after it, and the window is still worth opening. Chapter 6. The old man at the window. He was past 70 years old. Let that number settle before anything else happens in this chapter. 70 years of waking up in a city that was not his. 70 years of going to work for kings who did not share his God, his language, his memory of what home smelled like in the early morning. 70 years of being the foreigner in the room who somehow kept getting promoted. 70 years of a life that had been given to him by circumstance rather than chosen. And every single day of those 70 years, 3 times a day, he opened the window, turned west, and prayed. Not because it was required, not because anyone was watching, not because he had calculated that the practice was producing visible results, because Jerusalem was west, because the God he served was listening, because after 7 decades of this single daily act, the practice had become inseparable from who he was. The window did not remind him to pray. The window was simply what he opened. The direction was simply the direction he faced. Like a tree that has grown toward light for so long that it no longer chooses to lean. Darius the Mede had taken the throne after Cyrus conquered Babylon. He reorganized the empire into 120 provinces, appointed governors over each of them, and placed 3 senior administrators above the governors to keep the whole system accountable. He made Daniel one of the 3. This was not sentiment. Darius was not being kind to an old man who had served previous regimes. He looked at Daniel and saw what every ruler who had ever worked alongside him eventually saw. A mind that did not cut corners. A character that did not bend under pressure. A man who would not steal from him, would not lie to protect himself, would not use his position to quietly benefit at the empire's expense. He intended to put Daniel over the entire kingdom. And this is where the problem began. The other administrators and governors had been watching Daniel for years. They had watched him survive Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar and the fall of Babylon and emerge under Darius as if the transition had been arranged specifically for his benefit. They had watched this foreigner from Judah accumulate influence through every regime change, landing on his feet with a consistency that felt less like luck and more like something they could not name and therefore resented. They decided to act. They investigated his work. They searched his accounts, his decisions, his records from every year of every position he had ever held. They looked for the error, the small corruption, the moment where personal interest had quietly overridden professional integrity. Every official who has ever held power has such a moment. It is, in the cynical wisdom of career bureaucrats, simply the nature of things. They found nothing. The book records this with a plainness that carries its own weight. They could find no corruption in him, because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Not one thing. So they took the only angle that remained. They would not attack his work. They would attack his God. They went to Darius together, a coordinated group, radiating the air of men who had arrived at a consensus through independent and careful deliberation. They proposed a new decree, For 30 days, no petition was to be made to any god or any man except Darius himself. Violation meant the lions. Darius signed it, perhaps out of vanity, perhaps because a room full of advisors nodding together creates a momentum that is difficult to refuse without seeming suspicious of your own court. Perhaps simply because it seemed uncomplicated and flattering, and he did not read the thing carefully enough to understand what he was actually signing. Whatever his reason, his pen touched the scroll. And in the law of the Medes and Persians, what was signed could not be revoked. Not by anyone, not even by the king who signed it. The men knew exactly what they had constructed. A cage built from law itself, baited with the one habit in Daniel's life that was known to everyone in the palace. Because his prayer window was not a secret. It had never been a secret. For 70 years, 3 times a day, the window opened and the old man from Judah faced west and prayed. Every servant knew it. Every guard knew it. Everyone who had ever worked in that palace knew it. They had built the trap around the most visible thing in his life. Daniel learned about the decree the same day it was signed. He went home. He went to his room, opened the window, turned toward Jerusalem, and knelt. Exactly as he had always done. Same time. Same posture. Same window, open to the street below, visible from exactly the angle the men had positioned themselves to see it. Stay with this for a moment, because this is the heart of everything in this chapter. He did not close the window. He did not move to the center of the room, away from the view of the street. He did not quietly pray internally without the outward posture. He did not take a 30-day sabbatical from the public habit. He opened the window, not as defiance. Defiance is still oriented toward the thing you are defying. Daniel was not oriented toward the decree. He was oriented toward Jerusalem. The decree was simply a thing that existed in the world that day. And he continued doing what he had always done, the way a river does not defy the rocks it flows past. It simply keeps moving in its direction. After 70 years of opening that window, closing it would not have been prudence. It would have been the surrender of something that had no price. He was not willing to pay that price. The men saw him. They hurried to the king. Darius heard the accusation, and the text says he was greatly distressed. He spent the entire day trying to find a way around the law he had signed. Every legal mechanism, every written precedent, every angle that might allow him to spare the man he valued most in his administration. He consulted. He searched. He turned the problem over from every direction. There was no way out. At sunset, the men returned. They said, with the satisfaction of people who have planned carefully and executed perfectly, "Remember, O king, that no decree can be changed." Darius looked at Daniel. He had valued this man. He had watched him work alongside him through every crisis of the new administration. He had found in Daniel a quality he could not find anywhere else in the entire empire. And now the law he had carelessly signed required him to destroy the person he most respected. The law was doing exactly what his enemies had designed it to do. And he had helped them by not reading carefully enough. He gave the order. But before the stone was sealed over the entrance to the den, Darius said something directly to Daniel, in front of everyone present. In his own voice, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. Not your gods. Your God. Singular. The specific God that Darius had watched this old man serve without interruption through every empire and every crisis across every year they had worked together. The God Darius did not worship but had come, through nothing more than watching one faithful person open one window 3 times a day for years, to believe was real in a way that none of the gods of his own tradition had ever quite managed to be. The stone was sealed. Darius went back to the palace. He refused food. He refused entertainment. He paced, alone. The most powerful man on earth, unable to sleep because he genuinely cared about what was happening at the bottom of a pit he had helped to create. There is something deeply and simply human about Darius in this moment. He is not a villain. He is not a hero. He is a man awake in the dark because a decision made carelessly is now costing someone he valued his life. That kind of night is recognizable to most people. The long hours of lying awake in the full weight of something you cannot undo, waiting for a morning that might bring news you cannot bear to receive. Be still here for a moment. Let the night settle around you. Let your own long hours of lying awake find some company in Darius, pacing in his palace, genuinely distressed, genuinely powerless. You have had nights like that too, perhaps. When the thing you were helpless about was real, and the waiting was real, and the morning felt far away. At the first light of dawn, Darius ran. The text says he hurried. He went quickly, before anyone had assembled, before the official day had begun, to the sealed entrance of the den. He called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" The silence after that question held everything the night had cost. And then, from inside the sealed darkness, a voice, "O King, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O King." Darius was overjoyed. He ordered Daniel lifted out immediately. No wound was found on him. The lions had been fully capable. The den was real. The night was real. The trust that had sustained 70 years of open windows had sustained one night in a sealed darkness. The men who had set the trap were brought and thrown in. The lions overpowered them immediately. The text includes this detail to make clear that the animals had not been gentle or tame. Their restraint with Daniel had been something other than natural. Darius wrote a new decree and sent it to every part of the empire. "In every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." A pagan king, writing about the living God. In an imperial decree distributed through the most powerful administrative system on earth at that moment, reaching nations and languages and people Daniel never met and would never know. This is what 70 years of faithfulness at a window produced. Not just survival, not just continued employment. A royal declaration carried by the machinery of the Persian Empire to every corner of the known world. Daniel had not planned for this. He had not opened the window because he had calculated it would produce a decree. He had opened the window because not opening it was not something he was willing to do. And God turned that one daily, stubborn, unspectacular act into something that reached farther than Daniel could have imagined on the morning the trap was signed. Your faithfulness in private matters. The prayers nobody sees. The integrity maintained in conversations that are not recorded. The choice to open the window again this morning, even when yesterday's window produced no visible evidence that anyone was on the other side. Those things are not invisible. They are not wasted. They are being built in the slow and patient economy of God into something whose reach you cannot currently calculate. Daniel did not know, the night he was lowered into the den, that a decree was coming. He only knew the window was worth opening. It always is. Let your body settle now. Let the night grow quiet. Whatever you cannot fix tonight, whatever you are powerless about, whatever morning you are waiting for, the same God who sent an angel into a sealed den is awake and present in this room. He has not lost track of you in the dark. Sleep well, beloved. The window is still worth opening. Chapter 7. The night the heavens opened. Before this chapter, Daniel interpreted other people's visions. He explained Nebuchadnezzar's statue. He read the writing on Belshazzar's wall. He stood at the edge of other people's encounters with the divine and translated what they had seen into language the waking world could use. But during the reign of Belshazzar, something shifted. The visions stopped coming to other people and started coming to Daniel himself. He stopped being the interpreter and became the one who needed interpreting. This transition matters more than it might seem, because what Daniel received in his own visions was different in scale from anything he had been asked to explain before. When Nebuchadnezzar dreamed, he received a message about his own empire. When Daniel dreamed, he received the shape of history itself. And the book of Daniel is careful in this chapter to record not just what Daniel saw, but what it did to him. He tells us his spirit was troubled. His face turned pale. He was deeply disturbed. He kept the matter to himself for a long time. This is not the profile of a man who received a comforting message and went peacefully to sleep. It was night. He was in bed. He had not been fasting or seeking anything special. He simply fell asleep and the vision came. He saw the great sea, dark and churning, 4 winds driving the water into a violence that was beyond ordinary weather. The world was unsettled. Nothing was at rest. And from that sea, one after another, the beasts emerged. The first was like a lion, but with the wings of an eagle. Powerful, fast, kingly. But in the vision the wings were torn away, and the creature was made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a human heart was given to it. An empire stripped of its soaring glory, made ordinary. Daniel recognized Babylon in this. The empire of gold, humbled and grounded, given the heart of a man in place of the heart of a conqueror. The second rose like a bear, asymmetric, leaning to one side, with 3 ribs clenched between its teeth, relentless and hungry, a voice commanding it to devour. Persia, already consuming nations. The third was a leopard, with 4 wings and 4 heads, moving with impossible speed across vast territory. Alexander's Greece, sweeping the known world in a decade, fracturing into 4 on the day its one extraordinary driver died at 32. And then the 4th. Daniel could find no animal to compare it to. He simply described what he saw. Terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong, with great iron teeth that crushed and devoured and trampled everything before them. 10 horns on its head. Different from all the others in a quality that was not just greater power, but a different kind of power altogether. Rome, the empire that would crucify rebels on roadsides as a message to the living, that would reduce Jerusalem to rubble within a generation of its greatest teacher's death. While Daniel watched the 4th beast, a small horn grew among the 10, pushing 3 aside. It had eyes like a man's eyes, and a mouth speaking great boastful words upward, aimed at the throne of heaven itself. Daniel felt the weight of what he was seeing pressing down on him. He had lived inside empires his whole life. He knew in his body what iron teeth meant for real people in real cities. He had watched Babylon take Jerusalem at 15. He understood what conquest cost in human terms. And now he was being shown 4 of them, each more terrible than the last. And this voice, small and cunning and contemptuous, speaking against the very throne above all thrones. Then the scene changed. Without transition, the darkness and roaring gave way, the way one reality in a dream can simply become another, and what replaced it was so completely different in quality and texture that Daniel's mind had to reset entirely to receive it. Thrones were set in place. Many thrones, not one, arranged as in a court of judgment, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Let the room grow quiet here. Let your body grow still. Because what comes next in this vision is the image that Daniel carried for the rest of his life. The image that the whole book has been building toward. His clothing was white as snow, not the white of washed fabric, the white of something that has never been stained, a white that came from within, purity so complete it had become luminous. His hair like wool, not the white of aging, the white of eternity, something that existed before the concept of beginning, that had no first moment because it had always been. The throne was fire, not a throne decorated with fire, made of fire, burning with the holiness that is not warmth but truth, the kind of fire that does not consume what is precious but burns away everything that is not. Rivers of fire flowing outward from before it, thousands upon thousands attending it, 10,000 times 10,000 standing before it. And the books were opened. Daniel saw them. The vast records, everything that had ever been done in the world that God had made. Every act of kindness in rooms no one had witnessed. Every act of cruelty in rooms everyone had pretended not to see. All of it recorded. Nothing missing. The beasts were judged. The fourth was destroyed. The others stripped of their authority. Their seasons ended. Their empires concluded. And then the air in the vision changed again. From the direction of the clouds of heaven, a figure approached the throne. One like a son of man, not a beast, not a monster. Someone who looked human, who had the appearance of someone who had walked the earth, who knew what dust felt like beneath the feet and what sorrow felt like inside the chest. And he came wrapped in the specific atmosphere of the divine, the clouds that in the Hebrew scriptures from Sinai to the temple had always marked the presence of God moving through the world. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. And what was given to him was the direct opposite of everything Daniel had watched happen to the beasts. Authority, glory, sovereign power, all peoples, all nations, all languages, not taken by conquest, given. The Ancient of Days placed it in his hands the way a father places something irreplaceable in the hands of a son. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away. And his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Many within the Christian tradition understand this figure as the Messiah, the one who Jesus himself pointed to when he stood before the high priest and said, "You will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven." Many scholars across different backgrounds have noted the direct connection between the language of Daniel's vision and the language Jesus used of himself. Whatever one makes of the full interpretation, what the text is describing is a kingdom that arrives from entirely outside the system of human power. A kingdom that cannot be built by ambition or maintained by force. A kingdom that outlasts every beast, every boasting voice, every iron tooth. A kingdom that will never end. Daniel asked a heavenly being in the vision for the meaning. The answer was this: the four beasts are four kingdoms. But the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and possess it forever. The beasts had their time. The iron teeth had their season. Every boasting voice was given its measured span. And then the court sat, and the books were opened, and everything changed. Daniel lay down that night with his face pale and his spirit troubled. He kept the vision to himself. He did not rush to explain it to anyone. He turned it over in his mind, the way you turn over something that is too large to fully hold, too important to get wrong, too real to dismiss with easy summary. He wrote it down eventually, carefully, for the people who would come after him, for the people living inside the fourth kingdom who would need to know that iron teeth are not the last word. For the people who would read these words on quiet nights, tired, carrying the weight of a world that often feels exactly like the churning dark sea the vision began with. The throne is still there, above the churning, above the beasts, above every voice that speaks against heaven, above every empire that calls itself permanent. The Ancient of Days has not moved from it. Whatever this night contains, whatever beast feels like it is prevailing right now, whatever is loud in the world right now, you are not living in the final frame of this story. The court has been seated. The books are open. The kingdom has been given. Let your body grow heavy now. Let your mind grow still. Let the throne that Daniel saw be the last image in your thoughts before sleep arrives. The one seated there is not anxious. He is not improvising. He is not surprised by anything happening in the world right now. He is seated, and the kingdom that was given is everlasting. Sleep well, beloved. The throne is occupied, and the window is still worth opening. Chapter 8. The Weight of Knowing. 2 years had passed since the night of the beasts and the throne. 2 years of carrying it. Every morning Daniel woke and the vision was still there, not fading the way ordinary dreams fade. Present, pressed against the inside of his chest like a truth still being unpacked, one quiet layer at a time. He had gone about the work of the empire. He had attended to his duties. He had served faithfully, as he always served faithfully. And every day the vision was there in the background, too large to fully hold, too important to put down. Then a second vision came. This one arrived while he was awake, standing beside a canal in Susa, the water moving quietly at his feet, the sky clear above him, the ordinary world visible on all sides. And then, as he stood there, the vision began. He saw a ram at the bank of the canal. 2 long horns, one growing up later than the other and becoming the taller one. The ram charged in every direction. West, north, south. Nothing could stand against it. It did as it pleased and became great. And then, from the west, a goat. It crossed the whole earth without its feet touching the ground, moving with a speed that belonged to no natural animal. Between its eyes, one prominent horn, large and powerful, and it came toward the ram with a fury that was not just territorial but personal, driven by something beyond ordinary ambition. The goat struck the ram. Both horns shattered. The ram fell and was trampled. There was no one to rescue it. The goat became very great. And then, at the height of its power, the large horn was suddenly broken off. 4 horns grew in its place, one pointing in each direction of the compass. And from one of the 4, a small horn, starting small, growing toward the south and the east, and toward what the vision called the beautiful land. Jerusalem. Daniel felt the weight settle on him like stone. He had grown up in Jerusalem. He had stood in the temple court as a boy and heard the morning sacrifice begin as the sun came over the eastern hills. The daily sacrifice was not a theological concept to him. It was the sound of home, the smell of the first morning he could remember. And now he was watching something move toward it. Something small and cunning that grew until it reached the host of heaven and threw some of the stars to the earth and set itself up against the Prince of Heaven's armies and took away the daily sacrifice and cast truth to the ground. He heard a voice ask, "How long?" And the answer came, 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary would be reconsecrated. A limit, a measured time, which meant it was not permanent. That was the mercy inside the terrible specificity of what was being shown. And then Gabriel appeared. A voice called from across the canal, "Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision." As Gabriel came near, Daniel felt what he had felt before in the presence of heavenly things. Not the fear of a threat, but the fear of something from a different order of reality. He fell face down. He fell into a deep sleep on the ground. A hand touched him, raised him to his feet. "Understand, Son of Man, that the vision concerns the time of the end," Gabriel explained. The ram with 2 horns was the Medo-Persian Empire. The 2 horns, the Medes and Persians. The longer horn growing up later was Persia, which became the dominant partner. Together they had swept the ancient world, charging in every direction, unstoppable. The goat from the west was Greece. The large horn was the first king. History would give that king a name. Alexander of Macedon, born in 356 before Christ. By his mid-20s, he was dismantling the Persian Empire with a speed that defied every previous understanding of how armies could move. He crossed into Asia, fought at the Granicus, at Issus, at Gaugamela, moved through Persia and Egypt, and on into lands as far east as what is now Afghanistan and India, moving so fast that his feet seemed not to touch the ground, exactly as the vision had shown. And then the horn was broken. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 before Christ. He was 32 years old. The largest empire the world had yet seen, built in a decade by the speed and genius of one person, suddenly without the one person who had held it together by sheer force of will and personality. His generals divided it. Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus, Ptolemy, 4 horns pointing in 4 directions. History written in advance, in exact detail, by someone who was not guessing. Be still for a moment here. Before Gabriel continues, just let this rest in you. The vision had been given centuries before Alexander was born. And it described not just that an empire from the west would overthrow Persia, but that the leader of that empire would die at the height of his power, and the empire would split into exactly 4. This is not the pattern of a general prophecy that could fit many situations. This is the precision of someone who wrote history before it happened. Let that truth settle in you like something solid before the weight of what comes next arrives. Gabriel came to the most troubling part of the vision. The small horn. He described it plainly. A stern-faced king, a master of intrigue. Strong, but not by his own power. Destructive. Successful. Set against the prince of princes. But he would be destroyed. Not by human hands. This was Antiochus Epiphanes, ruler of the Seleucid kingdom from 175 to 164 before Christ. He named himself Epiphanes, meaning God manifest. He considered himself divine. He acted accordingly. In 167 before Christ, he entered Jerusalem. He stopped the daily sacrifice in the temple. He set up an altar to the Greek god Zeus in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred room in the most sacred building in the world, and sacrificed a pig on it. For Daniel, this was not merely a political event. The daily sacrifice, the holy place, the altar where the conversation between heaven and earth was maintained by the hands of the priests, all of it stopped by a man who called himself a god. He who had grown up with the sound of the morning sacrifice was now being shown that it would be silenced. The vision gave the number, 2,300 days, roughly 6.5 years, and then the sanctuary would be reconsecrated. What the vision promised, history fulfilled. In 164 before Christ, Antiochus died far from home while retreating from a failed military campaign. He was despised even by his own people, not by human power, exactly as the vision had said. And a family called the Maccabees, faithful Jews who had refused to bow, reclaimed the temple, cleansed it, and rededicated it to the Lord. The daily sacrifice resumed. Every year since then, the Jewish people have lit candles to remember this. Hanukkah, the feast of dedication, a celebration of the faithfulness of a God who numbered the days of the defilement before they began. Many scholars who study this vision across different traditions have observed that Antiochus may also serve as a pattern, a foreshadowing of a figure at the end of the age who will make the same defiance at a larger scale. Others see the prophecy as entirely fulfilled in the historical Antiochus. Both readings take the text seriously. What all agree on is this: the God who gave Daniel these words knew every detail of what was coming. He was not surprised by Antiochus. He counted the days before the defilement began. Gabriel finished speaking. Daniel was exhausted. The specific exhaustion of having received more than a person can hold comfortably. He fell ill for several days. When he recovered, he went back to the king's business. But his heart, the text says, was troubled. He sealed the vision as Gabriel instructed. He wrote it down for later, for the people who would need it when the appointed time came. And he went back to the window. Let the room grow quiet here. Because this chapter, more than any other, is about a very specific human experience that does not get named very often. The experience of carrying something true that you cannot fully share. The grief, too specific or too large to explain to the people around you. The understanding arrived at through your particular journey that lives inside you, real and present, and sometimes very heavy, with nowhere to put it down and no one who quite gets the full weight of it. Daniel spent years carrying sealed visions. He knew things about the future that he could not use yet. He had been given truths the world was not ready to receive. And he went about his daily work with all of it, pressing against the inside of his chest, unknown to everyone around him, known fully only to the one who had given it. You are not carrying whatever you carry alone tonight. The God who gave Daniel things too large for the world around him to receive, and who sustained him through decades of carrying them, sees exactly what you are holding right now. You do not have to understand it fully. You do not have to explain it to someone who will understand. You only have to bring it to the one who gave it to you and trust that he holds what you cannot. Let the canal flow quietly beside you. Let the night be still. He knows what you are carrying, every detail, every weight of it. Sleep well, beloved. He has not forgotten what he placed in your hands. And the window is still worth opening. Chapter 9. The Prayer That Split the Sky. There is a moment in every long life when you pick up something you have read many times before and find it reading differently. Not because the words changed, because you did. Daniel was somewhere in his late 60s when he sat down with the scroll of the prophet Jeremiah. He had read these words before. Many times, he had carried them in his memory through decades of exile as a kind of distant lamp, something that said, "This will end eventually." But this time, reading them, something opened. Jeremiah had written, "When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back." 70 years. Daniel counted. He had been taken from Jerusalem in the year 605 before Christ. He was now in the first year of Darius the Mede, the year after Babylon fell. Nearly 70 years had passed. His heart lifted. Then he looked up from the scroll. Jerusalem was still in ruins. The temple was still rubble. The people of Judah were still scattered across the empire, assimilated into foreign cities, their grandchildren perhaps not knowing the songs their grandparents had sung on the way to the morning sacrifice. What was God waiting for? And then, slowly, an understanding arrived that was sobering in its simplicity. The return would not happen because the clock had run out. It would happen because God was merciful. And the people had not yet done the thing that opened the door to that mercy. They had not turned. Not really. Not in the deep, honest, corporate way that acknowledged the full reality of what they had done and the full justice of what had happened to them because of it. Daniel understood this, and he understood something else. He was the only person positioned to do anything about it. He could not organize a movement. He had no political authority over the scattered Jewish communities across the empire. He could not build something that would repair the situation from the outside. But he could stand before God on behalf of his people and say everything that needed to be said. He set the scroll down. He took off his robe. He put on sackcloth. He covered his head with ashes. Not performance, not theater. The physical expression of an interior state that was entirely real, and he began to pray. He began with who God was, not with the request, not with the problem. He stood before the face of the one he was addressing and said what was actually true about him. O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with all who love him and obey his commands. He said this not as flattery, as orientation. as the honest acknowledgement that before you can ask anything truly, you have to stand truly in front of the one you are asking. Then he said who his people were. We have sinned and done wrong. We have been wicked and have rebelled. We have turned away from your commands and laws. We have not listened. Notice the word, we, not they. Not the ancestors who made the decisions that led here. Not the bad kings or the spiritually negligent generations. We. He included himself. He belonged to these people. Their failure was his failure to carry. Their need for mercy was his to seek. He moved through the prayer without hurry. He confessed the shame. He acknowledged the justice of the exile. He did not argue with the verdict. From inside that acceptance, he began to ask, O Lord, in keeping with all your righteous acts, turn away your anger and your wrath from Jerusalem. He grounded the request not in what the people deserved, but in who God was. The city bore his name. As long as it lay in rubble, the name it bore was in rubble too. If God was who he had always claimed to be, then Jerusalem's restoration was his concern as much as theirs. We do not make requests of you because we are righteous, but because of your great mercy. The prayer built from confession into intercession, from acknowledgement into desperation, until at the end it arrived at its most honest and most urgent place. O Lord, listen. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hear and act. For your sake, O my God, do not delay. For your sake, not for ours, for yours. Because you are the kind of God who keeps covenant. Because your character is the ground of this request. Because we have nothing to offer except the turning itself. He was still speaking, still in the middle of the sentence, and the air changed. A warmth arrived that had not been there, a light that was not the lamp or the sun, and from within it, a figure. Gabriel, the same messenger who had appeared twice before. The same angel who would, centuries later, appear to a young woman in a small Galilean town and change the course of history. Gabriel spoke gently. Daniel, I have come to give you insight and understanding. As soon as you began to pray, an answer was given, and I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. Stop. As soon as you began to pray, not when you finished, not when you had prayed well enough or long enough. The moment the prayer began, the answer was already in motion. Gabriel had left before Daniel's first sentence was complete. The journey had taken the entire length of the prayer, and now they were in the same room. The old man still on his knees, and the angel arriving at the end of a journey that had started at the beginning. The answer was already traveling before the prayer was finished. Let that be true for a moment. Let it do what it does to every time you have prayed and heard nothing. Every time the ceiling felt low and the words felt like they were going nowhere. The answer left before you finished the first sentence. Gabriel delivered what he had come to say. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city. Not weeks of days, weeks of years. 70 times 7, 490 years. And within those years, 6 things would be accomplished. To finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, to anoint the most holy. Daniel had prayed about the return from exile. God answered about the redemption of the world. He had asked about Jerusalem. God answered from the altitude of eternity itself. Gabriel gave the specific numbers. From the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One comes, there would be 69 weeks of years. The decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem was issued by King Artaxerxes of Persia in the year 457 before Christ. It is recorded in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. The command was explicit. Go back, rebuild the city. Many scholars who study this prophecy within the Christian tradition, using the prophetic calendar of 360 days per year that was common in ancient Near Eastern reckoning, have calculated that 69 prophetic weeks of years from the decree of Artaxerxes points toward the era of the 1st century, the era in which Jesus of Nazareth began his public ministry. This calculation is held by many careful scholars who take both the text and history seriously. It is worth saying plainly that these timelines involve interpretation, and thoughtful people who approach this passage with equal seriousness have arrived at different conclusions about the precise details. What is beyond dispute is this: Gabriel was describing the Anointed One, the Messiah, arriving in history at an appointed time according to a plan that had been in motion for centuries before anyone was born. And then Gabriel said something that passed through Daniel like a blade. After the 62 weeks, the Anointed One will be cut off and will have nothing. Cut off. The Hebrew word means removed, executed. The Messiah would come, and the Messiah would be killed. Not as accident, not as tragedy that might have been avoided. As the appointed event at the center of the 490 years, Gabriel continued, the city and the sanctuary would be destroyed again. In the year 70 after Christ, the Roman army under the general Titus surrounded Jerusalem, broke through the walls, burned the temple, and left not one stone standing on another. Exactly as the vision had said, the final week of the 70 has been understood differently by different scholars across many centuries and traditions. Some see it as completed in the 1st century. Others see it pointing toward events still ahead. What all agree on is this: every word Gabriel spoke that night has been moving toward its fulfillment with the same patient precision as every word that has already come to pass. Daniel sat in the aftermath. He had prayed for the return from exile. God answered with the plan that all of history had been moving toward since before Daniel was born. He had asked about Jerusalem's restoration. God answered with the coming of the one who would make all things new. He had brought God a small and honest prayer, and God answered from the full height of eternity. Gabriel was gone. The warmth was gone. The room was quiet. Daniel sat alone for a long time. He did not understand everything. He was not expected to. He was expected to receive faithfully and to trust completely and to write it down for the people who would need it later. He was right that they would need it. You are reading it tonight. Maybe tonight you are bringing God something small, a specific ache, a practical concern, something that feels modest in the scale of things, something you are almost apologetic about bringing to the attention of the one who holds all of history. Bring it. The answer is already leaving before you finish the first sentence. He is not waiting for sufficient eloquence. He is not waiting for the right spiritual posture or the correct theological precision. The turning itself, the first honest movement toward God, is enough. You are highly esteemed, not because you earned it, because you turned. Let the room grow quiet now. Let your body settle. Let your thoughts find somewhere to rest. Let tonight be what it is. A few hours of stillness in the presence of the one who holds 490 years and holds you at the same time. He heard you. The moment you began, sleep well, beloved. He is not far, and the window is still worth opening. Chapter 10. Standing at the river's edge. He was very old now. The book places this final vision in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Daniel had been taken from Jerusalem at 15 in the year 605 before Christ. By the time of this last encounter, he was somewhere past 80 years old, perhaps closer to 90. He had outlasted 3 empires. His hair was white. His body was frail. But the book, which has been precise and honest about Daniel throughout, says this clearly. His spirit was still strong. His faith was still steady, and his heart was still turned toward Jerusalem. 3 weeks before this chapter begins, something had troubled him. A vision had come concerning a great conflict, something that would happen to his people. And for 3 weeks after receiving it, he mourned. He ate no choice food, no meat or wine, no oil on his skin. He simply prayed and fasted, seeking understanding from the God who had been speaking to him since he was a teenager in chains on an 800-mile road. 3 weeks, 21 days. On the 24th day of the first month, he was standing on the bank of the great Tigris River. Other men were with him, ordinary human company on an ordinary morning. And then Daniel looked up. The other men did not see what he saw, but something reached them anyway. Some disturbance in the quality of the moment, some change in the air that had no visible cause. Such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. Daniel was left alone, and alone he saw the figure. He tried to describe it, as he always tried to describe what he saw. He reached for every image available. A man dressed in linen, a belt of the finest gold, his body like chrysolite, a gem that catches light from within and refracts it until it seems to glow. His face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like burnished bronze fresh from the fire, and his voice, when he spoke, like the sound of a multitude. Not one voice, the gathering of all voices into one, the way a great river contains every tributary that has ever flowed into it. Daniel stood alone in front of this, and the strength left his body. He had faced lions. He had delivered unwelcome truths to the most powerful kings in the ancient world. He had stood before furnaces and writing on walls, and the sealed dark of a den with no certainty of morning. He had lived inside every form of human intimidation an empire could produce, and had not broken. But this was different. This was not the fear of a threat. This was the honest collapse of a finite body standing in front of something infinite, not a failure of courage. Physics. The human frame cannot maintain its ordinary posture in that presence. It was not weakness. It was accuracy. His face went pale. He was helpless. He heard the voice begin to speak, and as he listened, he fell face down on the ground into a deep sleep. A hand touched him. He was trembling on his hands and knees when the voice came. Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, not you who interpreted correctly, not you who served faithfully, not you who survived the lions or read the wall or prayed 3 times a day without exception for 70 years. You who are highly esteemed, a name given, not earned, a quality that had been true about Daniel in the eyes of the one speaking from before Daniel had done anything, simply because Daniel had turned toward God and kept turning, one morning at a time, across the whole span of his very long life. Consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. Daniel stood, trembling, but standing. Do not be afraid, Daniel. 3 words that changed the temperature of the entire moment. Not a command, an act of mercy. Permission to remain upright in the presence of something that had just knocked him off his feet. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. Since the first day, not the day you proved yourself, not the day you finally prayed enough or well enough. The first day you turned your mind toward understanding and your heart toward humility, the response was already set in motion. And then came something Daniel had not expected. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me because I was detained there with the king of Persia. 21 days. Daniel had mourned and fasted for exactly 21 days. And for exactly those 21 days, the messenger sent on the first day had been delayed. Not by indifference, not by distance, by a conflict in a realm Daniel could not see. A battle between spiritual forces, happening simultaneously with his fasting, invisible above the surface of the visible world. The Prince of Persia, a spiritual power associated with that kingdom, contending against the messenger of God. It had taken Michael, the great archangel, to break through and allow the messenger to reach Daniel. Let this settle slowly. 21 days of seeking and hearing nothing. Not because nothing was happening, because the something that was happening was invisible. The answer was in transit the entire time. A battle was being fought on his behalf in the space between the first day he turned and the morning the messenger arrived. He could not see any of it. He only felt the silence. And the silence was not absence. It was a battlefield. The silence is not always absence. Sometimes the silence is where the battle you cannot see is being fought, on your behalf, by forces you did not summon and cannot stop. The messenger began to speak. What followed is the most detailed prophecy in all of Scripture. The angel moved through history with a precision that scholars in later centuries would compare, point by point, with the historical records of Polybius and Livy and Josephus, and find that the match held at every point. Kings of Persia, one after another, the fourth stirring up conflict with Greece. Then the mighty king from the west, Alexander, rising and falling at the height of his power, his kingdom fractured to the four winds. Then the long, grinding conflict between the kingdoms of the north and south, Egypt and Syria, with Israel as the corridor between them that every army crossed. Alliances arranged and broken. Daughters given in marriage for political gain and betrayed. Armies crossing and recrossing the same hills. The specific history of Antiochus Epiphanes, who had appeared in Daniel's visions before, here described in further devastating detail. His campaigns, his humiliation by Rome, his rage turned against Jerusalem, the abomination in the Holy of Holies, the faithful who resisted, the Maccabees who fought and won, the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in caves near the Jordan River in the 20th century, contain fragments of the Book of Daniel that ancient manuscript scholars have dated to the 2nd century before Christ. The prophecy was in written form before the events it describes occurred. Scholars who approached this text expecting to find a document written after the fact found instead a text that accurately described events that had not yet happened when it was written. Daniel listened to all of it. His body still weak from 3 weeks of fasting and one morning that had knocked him face down on the ground. He was hearing centuries of suffering, of faithful people being ground between the ambitions of empires, of the people he belonged to enduring trial after trial across generations. At the end, he asked what the outcome would be. The angel pointed beyond the historical conflicts toward a time of distress unlike anything the world had seen. But everyone whose name was written in the book would be delivered. And then, the resurrection. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Death is not the final condition of the human person. Every person who has ever lived will stand again, in a body, in full presence, before the one who saw them. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens. Those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Not the powerful, not the famous, not the ones whose names were cut into stone walls. The wise, the ones who knew God and walked in that knowledge and turned other faces toward the light. They would shine, not for a season, like stars that carry their own light. Forever, Daniel asked again for more explanation. The answer was, seal it up. The words are closed until the time of the end. Many will be purified. The wicked will continue to be wicked. But those who are wise will understand. He received specific numbers. 1,290 days. 1,335 days. Exact measurements of time that careful scholars across many centuries have studied and interpreted in different ways, each taking the numbers seriously because the God who gave them does not waste words. Daniel did not understand the numbers. He said so. He was not expected to understand everything. He was expected to receive faithfully, trust completely, and write it down. And then the last thing, the last words spoken directly to Daniel in all of Scripture. After the dreams and the lions and the furnace and the beasts and the throne and the prayer and the 21 days of silence and the figure whose face was like lightning, after all of it, these were the last words. As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. Go your way till the end. You will rest, and then you will rise, and you will receive your allotted inheritance. The word allotted means measured out in advance, set aside specifically, reserved under a specific name. The inheritance was not general. It was prepared for the one it was prepared for, before that one existed, waiting at the end of the road for the person who had walked every mile of the road faithfully. Daniel took the words in. He stood for a long moment at the edge of the Tigris. The water moved past him the way it had always moved, indifferent to the weight of what had just been placed in the room. The sky was the same sky it had always been. He put down the pen eventually. He went home. He opened the window. He turned toward Jerusalem. He prayed. And then one morning, at the end of his days, he rested. He closed his eyes in the city he had been brought to at 15 in chains. In the city that had never been home and had become home in the long, complicated way that exile makes something out of whatever it gives you. In the city where he had opened the window every day for 70 years, and he trusted the last words. You will rest, and you will rise. He rested. And somewhere in the future that he had spent his whole life helping to write, he will rise. As will everyone whose name is written in the book. Maybe tonight that feels very far away. Maybe the end of the days feels like a phrase in a prophecy that has no particular connection to the weight you are carrying into sleep. But the allotment is real. The reserve is real. The name written before you had a name is real. The God who called Daniel highly esteemed before Daniel had done anything to earn the title, who sent the answer before the prayer was finished, who fought a 21-day invisible battle on behalf of an old man fasting beside a river, that God knows your name too. Not in the general sense, in the specific sense, the way a shepherd knows which one has not come home, the way a father knows the sound of his own child's voice in a crowd. He knows you. You will rest, and you will rise. Let tonight be rest. Let your body settle into the particular mercy of sleep. Let your mind grow quiet and your thoughts grow still. Let the door close gently on this day and everything it contained, and let the next few hours be held by the one who holds all of it. He is awake. He is watching. He is present in this room, and the window is still worth opening in the morning. Sleep well, beloved. He has not forgotten your name, and everything that has been allotted for you is still waiting.
And so we reach the end of Daniel's story, but not the end of the story itself. Tonight you have walked beside a man from the morning. Everything was taken to the last words spoken over him at the edge of a river, at the end of a very long life. You have seen him at 15, looking up at unfamiliar stars in a desert and choosing to believe the God who made them was still watching him. You have watched him refuse the king's food and open the window and pray toward a city in ruins and tell the truth to men who could have killed him for it. You have watched him survive lions and carry sealed visions and age through 3 empires without bending. And you have seen what all of that daily faithfulness produced. Not comfort, though comfort came eventually. Not fame, though fame came. Not the life he would have chosen, because he never got the life he would have chosen. He got something else. He got the life that was given, lived as faithfully as one person could live it. One open window at a time. One plain plate at a time. One prayer toward a ruined city at a time. And God used it. He used it to record history in advance. He used it to produce a royal proclamation about the living God distributed across the entire Persian Empire. He used it to preserve a written record that has been read by people in every century since, sitting in rooms Daniel never knew existed, carrying questions Daniel never heard asked. You are one of those people. Tonight, and the last words spoken over Daniel are available to you. You will rest, and at the end of the days, you will rise. Not because you earned it, because it was allotted, prepared, reserved under your name before you had a name, before you had done anything, before you were capable of deserving or not deserving anything. The God of Daniel is not a distant historical figure. He is the Ancient of Days, seated above every empire that has ever risen and fallen since Daniel wrote the words down. He is the one from whom the river of fire flows, the one whose throne has never been vacated, the one whose kingdom has no end clause. He is present, right now, in the room you are in, as close as the breath you are about to take. Let us pray. Father, we come to you tonight grateful for this man and for the story you kept alive through him across centuries and empires until it reached this moment. Thank you for the window, for the decision made at 15 in the dust of an 800-mile road to keep believing, for the faithfulness that opened that window every morning when there was no particular reason to feel hopeful and every reason to feel forgotten. Thank you that you were there the whole time. In the room where 4 young men prayed through the night, in the furnace with the 3 who would not bow, in the silence of 21 days when the messenger was fighting his way through, in the field where a king had to learn to look up. Thank you that the answer leaves before the prayer is finished. Thank you that highly esteemed is a name you give, not a title we earn. Father, everyone resting with these words tonight is carrying something. Some have been carrying it for a long time. Some have been at the window for years with no visible answer. Some are in a furnace right now and cannot see the 4th figure yet. Be present with them, not necessarily in the dramatic way, though you are fully capable of that. In the quiet way, the way you were present in the plain plate and the open window and the ordinary morning prayer, in the sealed vision carried faithfully across decades. Guard their sleep tonight. Let their bodies rest. Let their minds go quiet. Let tonight be a few hours of genuine rest in the presence of the one who holds all things and is held by nothing. And when morning comes, let them wake as Daniel woke, with the windows still worth opening, with the face turned toward the place where you have promised to be, with the quiet certainty that the God of yesterday is the God of today and will be the God of every day that follows. Thank you for the story, for the man, for the window, for the angel who fought for 21 days to reach him, for the inheritance that has been allotted and reserved and waiting since before the foundations of the world, for the promise that holds tonight and every night. In the name of the one who came on the clouds of heaven, who was cut off and was not kept down, who rose and sits at the right hand of the Ancient of Days and is coming again. Amen. Good night, beloved. You will rest, and you will rise. He knows your name. And the window is still worth opening in the morning.